If I'm buying a boat out of charter, I don't need to hire a yacht broker.
Technically, you don't need to hire a yacht broker, but I would suggest you do.
Charter boats take longer to sell.
I would say yes.
If I own a boat in charter in the Caribbean, I should bring it back to the US before I sell it.
If and only if the vessel is U.S. duty paid.
Welcome back to Full Displacement, the podcast by Current Yachts. Today, we're going to answer the question, should you buy an ex-charter boat? So with us is Sam Durso. Welcome back, Sam.
Hi, guys.
And Amanda Haley. Guys, so excited about this topic. So many questions about this all the time. Should you buy an ex-charter boat? Boats that come out of charter programs have a bad rep. And to be honest, there's going to be a lot of considerations as to whether or not this is right for you. But we're going to discuss this topic with Amanda and Sam, starting with some stories, some actual numbers, as well as the red flags that you want to be aware of. So stay until the end. Amanda, why don't we start with your background and your experience working with charter boats, because that is not something every yacht broker will be well versed into, but you have that knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, for the last 5 years of my yacht brokerage career, I have been specialized in the charter market, selling boats into charter. And this is for one of the largest, actually two of the largest charter operators around the world. And I've had the unique opportunity to be in management, to understand the pitfalls and the strengths of both sides of charter operation, both bareboat and crewed. And they are very vastly, extremely different platforms. And we're going to get into that today.
Thanks, Amanda. Well, what about you, Marilyn? What's your background?
So in terms of boats in charter, I've had different roles as a marketer in the industry now for about 15 years. So, working alongside boat dealers that may offer light charter program, there are going to be some of these options more domestically, so US based. I've also worked for a yacht dealership who had a specialty with a ownership program similar to the one that Amanda described. But there are many ways to execute a charter plan. I come from the side of explaining these programs and promoting these opportunities to yacht buyers who may not be familiar with them, and I've done so in different capacities over the years.
Thanks, Marilyn. To give you my background, my name's Sam Durso. I'm the president of Impact Ignite. We're a startup studio, and we actually helped Marilyn and Amanda build Current Yachts. But today I'm here as a potential boat buyer, and I'm going to ask some questions that I'd want answered if I was looking at an ex-charter boat.
Let me start with the added information here that besides, my role as a marketer in the yachting industry and in boating, I have actually bought my first boat out of charter, out of the BVI, and I've been really pleased with the experience that I got out of it. I learned a lot. Don't get me wrong. There's a number of things that I discovered later on that I wish I had perhaps evaluated or looked at differently, but I have done a lot of sailing with my boat, a lot of learning on my boat, and I am so pleased that I did this, because if I had waited until I had enough money to buy the boat, I wouldn't have gotten all this experience. So I think it comes down to the opportunity as well to make sailing happen now. Sometimes, the savings are worth it because it means you're going as opposed to waiting. And so, how much longer are you going to wait to go cruising?
And I remember, because I helped you make that decision, Marilyn. I was your broker that helped you buy that boat. I remember coming to you and saying, this is a steal of a deal. Going through, okay, if we replace this and we do this boat will be really what you're looking for. So in that experience, it can be a really great deal for someone to look into buying an ex-charter boat. Some of them carry a stigma, and some of them can be the best boats out there. So it really depends. And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what those differences are today. So let's take, for example, two nearly identical 50-foot catamarans, same year, same builder, same equipment. One is $850,000. The other is $1.2 million. What's the difference? One spent 5 years in a charter fleet in the British Virgin Islands, and the other was privately owned. So here's the question. Is that $350,000 savings worth it? Is it a smart move, or are you buying someone else's problem?
Well, stick around and we're going to answer these questions.
So why is this topic important right now?
It's very important because of the current market conditions. Ownership costs are rising. The impact of tariffs is making a significant impact on people's decisions at this point.
And what do we mean by ex-charter boats?
Well, it's different when you're talking about a Caribbean-based boat versus a Mediterranean or other charter markets. The differences are 110 volt versus 220 volt, equipment levels. Boats in the Caribbean need to have all the bells and whistles with air conditioning. In the Med, you'll find that most boats are more bare and they don't have these extras. There's number of weeks in charter. In the Caribbean, a boat can work almost all year round, whereas in the Mediterranean, boats have to be put on the hard for winter. So you have bareboat, you have crude charter operations, and we have smaller boats in the Med mostly, and a lot of monohulls even, whereas in the Caribbean, you're going to see much bigger boats and a lot of catamarans.
Yeah, that's a really good segue into some of the questions we're going to discuss today. Obviously, we hinted to the operator and how that may impact the boat and its resale value, whether or not it was chartered really hard and the maintenance kept up to date. Those are super critical questions. But the first thing we'll do is discuss how those charter fleets work, because if you're not familiar with this way of running a business with boats in charter, we need to give you some of those insights first. How long a boat stays in charter is super critical, and Amanda touched on that. So I'm going to also refer back to an episode that we recorded about the planning and the exit strategy of buyers who are looking to keep perhaps the boat they're buying in a charter program. So refer back to this episode. I'm going to link up here with Patrick Worley. And so let's start with understanding how charter operations work. Amanda, can you give me a little bit of background?
Sure, most companies offer different models. Some are shared revenue models, some are guaranteed revenue models, some are owner-operator programs. And then there's also corporate fleets versus individual owner programs. So when you're talking about charter, it can be all over the map.
Can you tell us a little bit about the charter season intensity?
Peak season is going to be in the Med in the summertime, obviously. And peak season in the Caribbean is going to be wintertime when everybody wants to escape the cold. Usage patterns really do matter. And we covered these peak seasons in a previous podcast with Lisa.
Yeah, we're going to link to that episode below. Thanks for that, Amanda. You'll see and you'll hear in that episode that, again, we're talking about potentially 15 to 25 charter weeks per year, which is very intense. And the guest turnover means, you figure 8 people per charter, that's between 120 to 200 guests that create wear and tear on the vessel each year. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, remember, a charter boat works harder in 1 year than a privately owned yacht does in possibly 5 years.
And then why would a boat leave charter fleets?
One reason is the charter program is scheduled to be somewhere between 5 to 7 years. Most of the time when you buy a new boat, you'll sign a charter management agreement that can be renewed every year, but could last up to 7 years. Many of these charter operations want to upgrade their fleet also. Everybody likes the new shiny boat, so you can understand that they will want to upgrade and modernize their fleet year after year. And then there's the owners who need to exit the programs, as we discussed before, and maintenance begins to be an issue past year 5.
Yeah, all very good points. So in the next segment, I'm going to help you build a case for ex-charter boats because it's a compelling proposition. So let's start with why you're considering an ex-charter boat, because despite what people will say, there are a lot of good reasons to do this, and we'll start with the price advantage.
The real numbers are 20 to 40% below comparative private yachts. And that is a real incentive for some of these buyers who are price advantaged.
Can you give us an example of a model that maybe you've come across when you did comps recently for a seller and you saw 2 different models, one privately owned perhaps in Florida versus one in charter? What are some actual numbers?
Sure, there is a Lagoon 51 that is privately owned right around 1.4 million, and that ex-charter boat can be anywhere from $950 to right under $1 million. So you're looking at almost a $400,000 difference in these 2 boats. And one of the big differences is duty paid. That private yacht is duty paid, and there's a big chunk of that change already. The charter boats are often not U.S. duty paid because they'll come directly from the manufacturer and go to the Caribbean fleet, which means they're never entering the U.S. economy and U.S. duty is not paid.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But also remember, having a U.S. Coast Guard document for your vessel does not mean it's duty paid. So pay attention to that.
That's definitely something that most people misunderstand, is just because you have a U.S. LLC and your boat is U.S. Coast Guard documented, it does not necessarily mean that U.S. duty has been paid.
So, but why are the ex-charter boats offered at such lower prices then?
Well, a lot of it has to do with market perception, the stigma of a charter boat that's been rode hard and hung out wet. There's a lot of that. There's the facts that the engine hours are higher, that the usage is more, like Marilyn was saying, 120 people traipsing on and off the boat is very different than a family going on and off a couple times a year. So you have that, you have the cosmetic condition. So you can imagine with all those people coming on and off the boat, the dings, the nicks, the scratches are going to be more. And that all determines why the boat might be valued a bit lower.
So then after 5 years, when a charter boat comes out of charter, what kind of depreciation are we looking at?
Well, that one varies, but you can expect a range from anywhere from 30 to 50% depreciation, being if it's a sail catamaran or a power catamaran. Power catamarans seem to depreciate a bit faster because of the wear and tear on the engines and the costs of doing those services.
Very good point. Another pro actually is going to be the maintenance and the standards. And that, of course, will vary by operator. What would a good charter operator do in terms of maintenance?
The fact that charter operators only make money when boats operate and go out on charter. So they are highly, highly motivated to make sure that these boats are maintained and in working condition to make sure that their guests are happy. So I turn that into a pro. You've got the commercial coding and inspections that they need to pass. You've got the insurance company's mandates that they need to make sure that they fulfill.
And I'm assuming there'd be really good maintenance records on all these yachts, right?
That's an if, possibly, depending on the charter company you're with. I would say that the good charter companies definitely have very good maintenance records. Some of them may not, and that varies by, obviously, the operator.
And you tend to have better records, if I'm correct, on the crude yachts?
Sure, remember, in a bareboat charter, there's no one that's dedicated to the vessel. In a crude charter, there's actually someone that lives on the boat, maintains the boat full time, and keeps those records, and that's their job.
You have proven reliability for a boat. So as much as the boat has seen a lot of use, the fact that it's been running and operating tends to be a plus as opposed to, a garage kept boat that doesn't get used at all.
Yeah, I am a big proponent. Diesel engines like to run. They like to be used, and I would choose actually a boat that's been used over a boat that's been sitting and not been used. That's when you run into all sorts of problems. So for me, the usage, if well maintained, is not an issue at all.
Can you speak to that also for the systems? Is that true of other like generator and water maker? What's the limit to that argument, I would say?
Well, that comes down to the manufacturer. Let's take, for instance, a generator. If a generator is reaching that 10,000 hour range, you're going to expect that at some point it's going to fail and you're going to have to replace the generator. Diesel engines can run forever. If you're getting up into that 30,000 hour range, you may want to consider replacement. But if you've had good maintenance records and you can see that the impellers have been changed, the oil has been changed, all of these records year after year with good maintenance, diesel engines can run. That's what they're made for.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So one more plus, you've actually got a fully equipped boat from the galley to the charter-ready equipment, everything?
Yes, in most cases with charter boats, you will have all of these details. You've got the cookware, you've got better equipment. Most of the time, charter boats will have the highest of specifications on their equipment. Water maker, air conditioner, generator. The nav equipment, it can be either or. Remember, these charter boats are not traversing long distances across the ocean. They're taking guests from island to island. So you may not have the best navigation equipment on a charter boat, but you'll have good radio and sound system. You'll have underwater lights that make the boat look really sexy. You'll have the courtesy lights. You'll often have a hardtop bimini or a hydraulic platform. So you'll have some of the higher end specifications on these charter boats because it actually is what makes them charter out more over other people's vessels.
Since we were talking about equipment, is the dinghy something that typically comes with an X charter boat or no?
It depends. Bare boats usually have a fleet of dinghies, and they basically take a working dinghy and put it on the charter. And you may or may not have a dedicated dinghy that comes with your boat. When we're talking about fully crewed boats, they usually have a very nice high-end dinghy that is of absolute value when it comes to resale and will go along with the boat. So it really depends of the two programs.
All right, that's a really good recap of why you would consider buying an X charter boat, all the pros. Now, obviously, there's a back to the coin, and I'd like to get real with actually what the buying of an X charter boat entails. First, let's talk about wear and tear and hard use, starting with the reality of what visually this means, perhaps even structurally. Could you speak to your experience on that? I mean,
Sure. And I'm going to separate the two models very clearly. You've got bareboat charter on one end, and you've got the fully crewed charter on the other. Let's take bareboat to start. These boats are rented by people who don't own them, and that is a very real concept. They've got a different mindset than an owner would take. They are often inexperienced, and it's a party atmosphere, so they get heavy use. You've got the obvious cosmetic damages that will happen. You'll have the galley fiddles and portions of the boat that will have chips. The marine heads will get high use. You've got the teak surfaces, or just the wear and tear on those surfaces will be scratched, the gel coat, the non-skid. And then you're talking about people coming in and out with oftentimes sunscreen, so they'll sit down on the couch, and there may be more stains on the upholstery. The mattresses and the bedding will have use, and we'll leave that one alone. But you can understand that this is a rental environment.
So all the high traffic areas will have damage. Pretty obvious.
Yeah, and that's just comes with wear and tear, the normal wear and tear. In one of the contracts of the charter operations that I represented, they went so far as to be specific on what that wear and tear was. So if there was a scratch this long or a dent this deep, at that point, they would then replace that floorboard. So they really did go in to spell out what actual wear and tear was. Those little chips and scratches and surface things, you're going to have to deal with those. But if there's a huge dent that's in the floorboard from something falling down, they'll probably replace that.
and that is something too to keep in mind, because as an owner, if you're inexperienced, perhaps you just got your boat delivered, you can still research that fine print, but you're going to have a phase out that will only cover so much of that, repair and refit. It's not going to be perfect. And as Amanda said, the devil's in the details. So read and find out, what does that cover? But again, in our conversations with owners, we found out that their understanding of a phase out isn't necessarily matching reality. So, and what about mechanical systems then? We talked already about high engine hours, and talk about generator hours on a catamaran in the BVI. That's pretty appalling
Sure.
to
I
me.
mean,
But
people love their air conditioning, and in order to have air conditioning on a boat, you are running that generator 24/7. I was on a charter in the BVI. We did not turn the generator off once. Now, if that boat comes back and the oil is changed right after that, running of, a solid 7 days, then that's fine. These engines like that, and it's actually could be a good thing, but it really does come down to how often that maintenance is being done. The air conditioning systems, they're running at capacity, and the water makers, they're producing their maximum output daily. And we know these systems like to be used. The freshwater flushing actually is good for them. It just really comes down to the maintenance.
Can you give us some actual numbers on what it costs for a typical refurbishment?
That's the thing I love about boats and possibly buying an ex-charter boat is all of these things can be replaced. So if the cushions are worn out and you need to replace the accent pillows, and you need to redo these things, they come with a monetary value and you can put that into the price point of your ask. So let's take, for instance, soft goods. That can be anywhere from 15 to 30,000. If you need to refinish a deck and redo the teak, that could be anywhere from 10 to 50, depending on how much teak is on that boat. Then you've got the interior cosmetics. Some are easier than others. Some is vinyl, some is actual wood. So you have to kind of look at how much you want to replace that. And the total year costs in that first year of refurbishing just the interior and making it look pretty again can be 100 grand. On a 500K purchase, that's not so bad to make it look like a new boat on the inside.
A very good point. Now, I want to move on to disadvantage number two that perhaps yacht buyers are not aware of, and that is the cost of the delivery. We've touched on the import, but the delivery component first, right? Because the boat is not near you. Let's say you will go and take a look at it, and then if you like it, then you have to go back, perhaps then do your survey sea trial. Let's talk about this. The cost of the delivery to bring this boat then back to you. Any ideas, any cost per mile, or how does that work?
Well, I've seen it in two different scenarios. I've seen it as a cost per mile, but I've also seen it more so in the cost per day. This is my crew cost per day because if they go by mile and they run into a storm and they're sitting there for a couple days, they're losing that time, and time is of value to them. So most of the time what I'm seeing is people actually charging per day. And for a good captain who has offshore capabilities, I would expect anywhere from 500 to 700 US dollars per day. Now, you can get a lot cheaper than that with foreign crew, but they may not have the credentials and may not be what your insurance will need. So I've seen insurance requesting people to bring boats, say, across the Atlantic that have had Atlantic crossing experience before, and they won't cover you unless you do have a captain like that on your vessel. So it really makes a difference. I've seen anywhere from $4 to $7 per nautical mile when you're going the other route. So really just vet your captain and make the best decision for you.
Because for a big boat coming back from BVI, say, to Florida, Amanda, what would be that price? Like, it could easily be 20 to 25 grand, right?
It could be right around that 10 to 12 grand. I just recently priced this out for another client to bring the boat from, it was Bahamas to Belize. And that took about 7 days. And the cost was right around that $10,000 mark.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Oh,
maybe
that is
not as bad as
crazy.
I first thought. And what about going all the way to the West Coast? Let's say you're on the West Coast of the US, you have a boat in the Caribbean. There's actually a lot more variables, but
But yes,
delivery costs are a real thing, right?
I mean, it just depends on your broker through the Panama Canal. There's a reason why boats are $100,000 more when they're on the West Coast. It's because they've had to do that trip through the Panama Canal, and that depends on what kind of broker you're getting, if you're going to be putting it onto a ship or if you're actually paying a crew to bring it through for you. So that one is such a variable, I couldn't even place a number on that one. But knowing that it does cost a whole lot more to get a boat onto the West Coast.
Yeah. And here is the other thing, too, that I would warn any boat buyer that's looking to buy a boat that's far away. Do not underestimate the challenges of bringing this boat to where you need it to be. Because not only does that boat require some repair and maybe some TLC, but on the more critical component of, say, engine reliability, for example, if you have mechanical failure, or if the crew you hired has mechanical failure in the middle of nowhere, the importance of having access to support and parts and the cost of the delays and the cost of those repairs can put a serious dent in your budget. So, if the boat has running rigging that's end of life and the phase out said it's still serviceable, but it's really not, there's a number of things that you should not wait on and do, say, stateside. You're going to want to have that taken care of before the boat gets moved.
Yeah,
That's just
and
a high risk, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't let that scare someone else away either. If you can plan and you can prepare and you can get these parts and you hire a captain that can do some of these changes on the fly, that all comes down to, the work you put in beforehand to send down spare parts, to make sure that the running and standing rigging is checked, and to have spares on hand and an able captain that's able to do those types of repairs on the fly.
Sure, sure. This all relates to what kind of condition is the boat in. So after you've done your marine pre-purchase survey, you'll have a really good idea of that. And some of these things might actually be required before you close on the boat. So I'm just saying, know what to expect based on that survey and what that will entail and the urgency of some of these upgrades slash repairs and maintenance and so forth. And then do you want to say a word about the cost of repairs in the Caribbean and access to skilled labor? Because that's a real challenge at times.
Yeah, a lot of the times when you're thinking about doing these repairs in foreign countries, you have to take into account your duty that you're going to be paying to get these things that you may be able to source in, say, Florida or Fort Lauderdale, and then to bring them down to the Bahamas or the BVI. There are import duties that will then make that cost be a lot higher. So you really have to do your due diligence, and getting work done in these foreign countries may seem like it's cheaper, but in the end, it's really not.
So you mentioned the duties. What about these tariffs in the current climate right now? Like, how do they play into all this?
That is really something to pay attention to when you're buying the boat. Depends on who the manufacturer is. If it's a South African made boat, you could be subject to 30% tariffs. If it's a boat made in the EU, it could be up to 25%. Most European boats, like French built boats, are at 15% now. And with Taiwan and China, it can be up to 45%. So you really do need to pay attention to who the manufacturer is and what those duties would be if you chose to import the vessel into the United States.
And to this point, I'm going to link to this episode with Michelle. We just recorded that. She's a customs broker, and she gave us a lot of insights into importation and the duty on yachts. So listen in for more details on that. Now, what if the boat is not imported, Amanda? What's the challenge with that?
As a licensed yacht broker in the state of Florida, I am not allowed to show a boat that is brought into U.S. waters without it being imported or duty being paid. And I cannot show that vessel to any U.S. residents. I can show it to a Canadian citizen. I can show it to a Russian citizen. But if that boat is going to be bought by a U.S. resident, I am not allowed to even step foot on that boat to show them that vessel.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction. And it's happening more and more. Let's just put it this way. So we want to make sure that we follow the law. The last thing we would want is to show a vessel that's not open for sale to U.S. residents while in U.S. water, because then duty could be forced on that owner. Let's just do this the right way. And for that, we may have some strategies that we can discuss with you. If your boat is leaving a program, say in the Caribbean, we can talk to you about that. Let us know, and we'll put the contact for Current Yachts down below.
Yeah, you don't want to risk having your vessel seized just because you didn't know the laws. So really be educated, and there must be an actual placard on the vessel that says not for sale to U.S. residents while in U.S. waters.
And for me, the largest con, right, for the ex charter boat purchase is really the deferred maintenance. And I understand the boat will be mostly functional, but it will not be super pretty, right? That's the wear and tear. But what about the rest of the boat, the integrity of the boat? I think charter economics, especially with bareboat, tells us that mechanical first, cosmetic last. But what if mechanical is not first? What could be overlooked? What kind of stories have we seen in the real world?
Sure, I think we kind of touched on it before. Is, obviously if a generator is running for 7 days straight and the impeller is never changed, and let's say pieces of that impeller break off and go into the heat exchanger, then you're looking at major repairs that, if not handled right away and that maintenance is deferred, it can cause major problems and shorten the lifespan of that generator. So these are the things that you want to be aware of and have maintenance records for in order to allay any fears moving forward. I mean, I'm a big proponent of buying these charter boats. I think they're great deals for people who go in with eyes wide open.
So then I guess one thing on the bright side would be that if I have to go in and do all of these maintenance and upgrades, I can do it the way I want it. so I can customize it any way I want. And maybe that's a benefit for a lot of people.
Absolutely, it is. It's making it your own. If you see that these mattresses are past their prime, it's easy to have another mattress made and throw that in brand new. And if you don't like the color scheme that was in there before, all right, put on new padding.
All right. Another con for buying an extra boat oftentimes is specifications and layout that may be more charter optimal versus private usage. We're going to talk first, of course, about the layout. Everybody prefers the Maestro layout, meaning the owner version, specifically for catamarans. But we have similar situations too with monohulls where the more cabin, the better. But for you as a buyer looking to cruise privately, maybe not the best option. Can you tell us more about that?
I actually prefer having more storage and feel like sometimes those owner versions where you can sit down and put your shoes on is wasted space. Or if there's some place to sit and work, it's not the best use of space. In my opinion, as a live aboard sailor, I prefer more places and I could make one room instead of having it be a place where someone sleeps and convert that into a pantry or storage area. Or for me, I wanted a closet for my shoes and my clothes and my dresses. So it really just depends on the way the person is going to change this boat and make it their own.
Another example, too, of what may be charter optimized but not the best choice for you is some of the exterior cushions have a very tough finish. And when you actually first sit down on one of these brand new catamarans headed to your charter fleet and you sit down on a cushion and it doesn't even feel like a cushion yet because it's not broken in and it's a very kind of plasticky feel. So those are the things that, again, you may come to replacing, but something to keep in mind.
Sure, and this is one of the great things about an ex-charter boat is the bones are good. You can always redo some gel coat and make it look new again. You can change the fabric on the cushions, and instead of having the fake vinyl feel, you can have a luxurious soft fabric for yourself. Now you want to put in a beautiful teak table that you know you're not going to spill all types of oil on and get stained. So these are the things that I talk clients through when they're choosing these different options. Do you want the upgraded teak table? I'll say no. For charter, you don't want the upgraded teak table. You want to put the standard white table on that doesn't get stained, that can be wiped down and looks nice. And then later, if you want to take this boat out and keep it and make it your own, then you can put on a refurbished, beautiful teak table on afterwards.
Very good. And that takes us to con number 5, which is obviously as a result of a pre-aged charter boat, the potential for a shorter lifespan. True?
Yeah, there's a reason why manufacturers will put a 2-year warranty on a private vessel and a 1-year warranty on a charter boat. It just comes down to the wear and tear.
So then, what can someone expect from a 5-year-old charter boat then?
Sure, you would expect the sails, if it's a sailboat, to have more exposure to sun, more time open, and that will make the sails need to be replaced every 2 to 3 years instead of 4 with a private vessel. And obviously, it comes down to the engine hours. I've seen, on average, some charter boats can have from 600 to 1,000 engine hours per year. That's for an average charter boat in the Caribbean. That's about it. And when you're talking about private use, you're good to get a couple hundred per year. So it really does make a difference. And there will be multiple systems that will need to be replaced after that 3 to 5 year time frame.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. So conceivably, too, on the resale, even if you refurbish the boat to some great extent, it may continue to be considered a charter boat because it has older systems and it has had just a harder life. True?
Yeah, unless the person has done the work and replaced it and put in brand new engines and a brand new genset and all new electronics and all new sails and redid the running rigging. At that point, it can be right up there with the cost of a private vessel. So it really just depends on how much money and time is spent in these upgrades when the boat goes back for sale.
Very true. One that scares people away very easily is the unknown, history of the boat as far as incidents, right? If you look in the online groups and chats around different destinations, BVI is one of them. We see a lot of boats that just kind of run loose off of their mooring. And that's always a little scary. Not all damage is reported or documented. The minor stuff perhaps is not a big deal. But if there is something really significant, It should be documented, and that is, of course, an important consideration when you have your survey done. But what else do we see a lot in the charter usage?
Yeah, and that is a great point for negotiation. Listen, I have been a sailor and I have touched bottom. It has been in the sand, it hasn't been on a reef. And there's this saying in sailing that if you haven't touched ground, you're a liar. So those kinds of mistakes happen. But if there is something significant that has happened, usually there will be some type of insurance documentation. There will be a survey of how it was rectified, and you'll be able to see the steps. Also, when you go and have your pre purchase survey, your surveyor can then double check that portion of the hull that may have been damaged and make sure that it was done correctly. So you can mitigate any fears you may have about a boat that has had some type of material damage for those types of things. A lightning strike can actually be a good thing because then you know all of the electronics have been replaced recently. So some of these things that people might consider bad are actually pluses in my book.
So there's no Carfax for boats then, right?
Not at this point, no. And that it really comes down to the charter operator keeping good records to see if you have that.
So before we dive into the red flags, I wanted to emphasize Amanda and I at Current Yachts have had experience working together with buyers, sellers of charter yachts for over 20 years together. So we're excited and delighted to assist you. If you have any questions, let us know. You can post your comment below or connect with us through the Current Yachts website. We'd love to help you. Just understand there are specific requirements for boats being sold out of charter, whether you are the owner currently looking to sell or a buyer considering that purchase. So, red flag about buying an ex-charter boat. When to walk away.
So the first thing that I've noticed is lack of current photos or video on these listings. And then there's no list of equipment in the yacht listings. And the overall charter boat listings are usually horrible. What else can we expect with that, Amanda?
A lot of the times there won't be any maintenance records. There'll be gaps in the service history and incomplete inventory list and very vague answers from the charter companies because they don't really know any prior history, prior damage. They may be a new base manager that just walked into this role and may not know the history. So those are some red flags when there is no history, when there is no information. That makes it very risky. Doesn't mean that it's bad necessarily, but it makes it risky and that you need to then trust your surveyor all the more to double check before you go into some kind of a purchase.
Okay. Red flag number 2. What if we have a budget charter operator? We know not all fleets are created equal. The care to the boat will vary. What can you tell us about this? What are the signs that would tell us to just walk away?
Sure. That's very, very clear. The first thing is to go on and compare charter prices. So look at a similar price age boat, size boat in one fleet compared to the other. If you're seeing rock bottom charter rates, that's probably a sign that they're a budget charter operation. Look at their online reviews. See if the boats are constantly being broken and needing a fix. Also, crew support. If they have minimal crew support, that's another red flag. You're going to be expecting the minimal maintenance when there's not a strong mechanical crew on the docks that are able to turn these boats around in between the charter and do those oil changes and do those impeller changes and the filter changes that are important in between these different charters going in and out. So talk to qualified charter brokers. They'll know as well. They'll know that this specific boat has had issues, and they'll be able to give you a little bit of a clue.
But as a buyer, how do you research a charter operator or fleet management company?
Online is your best tool. And actually, I've said this before, going to the actual base and seeing with your own eyes is very important. And when you're there to do your survey, you'll get that opportunity to do so.
So you're saying like TripAdvisor, for example, to review the charter experience from actual guests, yes?
Sure, and you can look up who is booking those boats, the charter operators. You can go on Facebook and see if there's any forums that might be available. People are a lot more vocal on the internet these days, and if you do a little bit of research, you might be surprised at what you find.
Very good. Red flag number 3, major systems are already at the end of life, right? So those critical systems that are approaching replacement time, what does that mean? Does that mean that you have to negotiate further or just walk away altogether?
No, I think you have to do the math because obviously a generator that has 8,600 hours is close to the end of its life, and you're going to have to expect to put $18,000 to $30,000 into your offer price because that will have to be replaced within the next year or two. Or maybe not. Maybe you plan on just having very sparse use of that generator, or maybe you're going to then put in a very big solar and lithium bank. So all of these things you need to create a spreadsheet, find out what would be for replacement cost, and factor that into your asking price.
So then we talked about replacement costs earlier. Then at what point does it stop making sense, Amanda?
I'd say if between delivery cost, repairs exceed 20% of the purchase price in that first year, then you might want to look for boats that have more recent upgrades or just a newer boat. Remember, a fiberglass boat can last for 25 years, and it really just has to do with the bones of the boat and then how much it costs for those system upgrades that you actually want and are important to you.
And we know this is a lot, right? It's a lot of information. And if you've never done this before, we're going to share with you a boat buyer's checklist, and you can access it at the link we'll post below. It's got kind of the questions you need to ask and the document you should know about before making an offer. So again, get this free checklist. We're going to link to it below. If I can recap, Amanda, what are the best boat types to buy out of charter? Catamarans are king, yes?
I would say yes. They are like floating condos on the water. Everybody loves them. You have much larger inventory to choose from. You're going to get a possible better deal. And you've got all the charter-friendly features that cruisers really do want these days.
And the sweet spot on size for catamaran, you'd say, what, 45 to 55 feet maybe?
Sure, 45 to 60 feet is what charter companies are looking for. Remember, more beds, more heads, so that they're able to put as many guests on that charter fleet along with crew. So you have to remember there may be just 4 couples, but then you need your captain and your chef. So then you're going to be pushed into a 6-cabin boat.
What about monohulls and power yachts in charter?
Sure, that's a much smaller market. There is definitely monohulls coming out of charter and power yachts coming out of charter in these recent years, but you're going to have lesser inventory to choose from. And the key difference for power yachts is their resale value because of those high engine hours. So be aware of that.
Okay, so then how do I decide if an ex-charter boat is right for me?
So I would suggest that you ask yourself as a buyer these questions. First of all, can I handle the cosmetic imperfections? Am I handy? Do I like to tinker? The second would be the total cost. When you add up all the things that you need to repair and fix to your liking, is that really going to make a price difference for you? The third would be, does the boat's history have proper maintenance? Do you see that this boat has been well maintained? Number 4 would be, are you comfortable with the higher engine hours and the usage and the wear and tear on these interiors and the systems? Also, number 5, do you have a contingency fund for any surprises that may come about? Those are the 5 big questions that I would ask myself before looking at a charter boat.
And to be true, number 5, this applies to pretty much any boat purchase. Having a contingency fund and planning for surprises is a good idea. If you find this episode helpful, please continue to follow Current Yachts and the Full Displacement podcast. Make sure to give us a like and share your comments below.
So when I'm looking at all these prices online and I see these huge savings on these charter boats, man, it's so tempting to just want to jump at that and look at it. But if I don't have the experience, am I really walking into something I shouldn't be?
It just depends, Sam. Do you have a good maintenance person that you trust? Is it someone that you work well with? A lot of the times I'll see these salty sailors who know the good bones of a boat, and then they'll bring a mechanic with them, and the mechanic will say, oh no, I got this. I can refurbish this, or I can replace this part. And then I see them doing their math, and they're saying, okay, well, if we can put this in, if we can put in this generator for $18,000, and we can replace this one AC for $3,000, and we can fix this porthole leak right here. And then they add all that up and they see the savings that they're getting. It actually becomes a very good deal.
So it's a little bit like real estate where you may consider a flip. You need to bring your general contractor with you. If you're not knowledgeable, bring somebody who knows and can tell you, oof, walk away. Or, yes, these could be done and can help you put the numbers in that spreadsheet that you might be working with. Otherwise, it's just a lot of question marks. And a question mark that's off by 20%, when you add them all up, and there's 10 question marks, that can really add up to some crazy dollar numbers. So
Some of these prices are so tempting, but I wonder how similar is it to if you're buying a sports car that might have been in a lot of accidents or it might have frame damage. You want to do it, but are there any game over decisions that just as a buyer I wouldn't be able to find out on my own?
You may not know, but your surveyor should know. And that's why it's very important to have your surveyor look for things like structural integrity. The boat may look beautiful on the outside, but if the doors don't close just right or they can see something in the keel when the boat is hauled out, that would be your clue to just maybe walk away at that point, because any resale value, unless you're going to put a lot of money into it, wouldn't be worth it.
I also would say that I think the biggest advice would be go look at a ex charter boat for sale and see what that looks like from one operator, let's say. And if you decide that particular boat or operator isn't going to be the right fit for you, don't give up. Just go look at one other perhaps. So plan to look at least two boats if you're going to make the trip down. And then before you commit to an expensive survey, bring that friend along who knows what you're looking at if you don't and can help you assess and say, oof, I can feel that the deck is soft underfoot, or, oh, this standing rigging isn't looking good. The reality is a lot of these boats coming out of charter are only a few years old and they're in great shape. Now, there's the caveat of hurricane damaged boat, and that must be disclosed in the listing. So make sure you ask for that seller disclosure, and the charter base must disclose this information, and then decide what kind of charter boat am I interested in buying. One that has sustained significant damage and is a steal of a deal, or perhaps one that is well priced for what is a well used proven vessel that doesn't have anything major going on, against it. So there are going to be different kinds of charter boats out there. And your role and your job is to first look at one of these boats, ideally two from different fleets, and just get a feel for what the wear and tear looks like. And of course, you'd have decided by then that you're okay with a bit more engine hours, but just see it in person and see how you react to, your counter is chipped off and the wood veneer is coming off, and just know what can be repaired and what might be too expensive to repair for this to be worthwhile.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the cost savings are so attractive. It's just like a new car. You buy it, you drive it home, and it depreciates 30%. This is the same thing. If I'm going to have the boat for a year and I just lost all that money, why not let somebody else take that hit?
That's a very good point. Like I said, a lot of these people have taken a tax advantage and aren't afraid of selling the boat at a loss, but that could be your gain.
Are there instances where a charter boat leaving a fleet being offered for sale can stay or go to a different charter program? How does that work?
I actually see this all the time. I have a small boutique fleet down in Belize, and we have some really great charter vessels that are new, 2024, 2023, that are for sale and can actually stay in a charter fleet. So I see the opportunity for this to be absolutely wonderful for people who are looking for an ex-charter boat to remain in charter. Check out those opportunities. There's some really good ones. For instance, our Lagoon 51.
Yeah, that's a great boat, Bellissima. And we also can guide you if you're interested in keeping a boat in a charter fleet. Some fleets will not take pre-owned boats and some do. And there are still some great tax advantages that may be available in your circumstance. Again, we're not CPAs or financial planners, but we can guide you to the resources to help make that decision.
So remember, the boat doesn't have to be new. It just has to be new to you in order for you to qualify for some of those tax advantages.
Yes, really good point. Based on your experience, Amanda, whether new or pre-owned, what percentage of buyers are happy with a purchase versus wish they hadn't done it when it's a boat in charter?
Sure, it really comes down to the buyer. So, when I have seen these transactions take place successfully, it's someone who is not afraid at all to roll up his sleeves, to put in the work, to save that money. It's usually the budget buyer saying, I can't afford a 50,000 I can't afford a 50-foot boat, but I can get this 50-foot boat out of charter and then I can put $100,000 of upgrades and my blood, sweat and tears into this vessel and then I can afford the big boat that I actually want instead of having to settle for a 42-foot boat.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So basically, I'm a good candidate for X Charter if I am budget conscious, but I have realistic expectations and I value maintenance over perfect cosmetics. Does that pretty much sum it up?
Exactly. And you should probably avoid an X charter boat if you really want a pristine boat, because that will be very, very rare. And number two, if you're absolutely risk averse with unknown issues, because you have to be nimble and surprises tend to occur. So be mindful of that. So at the end of the day, buying an X charter boat can be absolutely a really good idea, but you have to do the math, know what to expect, and be prepared. It can be an incredible value or it can be a very expensive lesson. So the difference is not just the boat itself, but how well prepared you are. So do your homework and share with us in the comments below. What has been your experience? What have you learned? And what would you do differently?
With the right approach, realistic expectations, and professional guidance that we can offer you, you can actually sail away with a fantastic yacht at a fraction of the price. Just make sure you go in with your eyes wide open and ready for surprises.
Thanks so much, guys.
Until next time, thanks for watching.
Fair winds!